Welcome to this video where I'll show you how to build a simple RESTful API using Python and Flask. Flask is a micro framework that is used by many companies today to build production-ready microservices. We'll keep it simple. We're just going to build a simple API. We're going to cover all the HTTP verbs, so that is get, put, post, patch, and delete. So essentially we're going to fetch all our users. It's going to be a users API. We're going to fetch all our users. We're going to fetch a specific user by their ID. We're going to create a user. We're going to update a user. And we're also going to delete a user. We're not going to cover any authentication or authorization. I will cover that in a later video. And also we're not going to do any data validation that comes from the request. We're gonna cover that as well in a later video. We just want to keep it simple, learn how to build an API, and then build on that. So I'm going to move into my IDE and show you how we do this. So here I'm in my IDE. First of all, we need to install Flask. And I do that with a package manager for Python called Poetry. However, you can do it with pip. So you could do pip install, and then you can say Flask. Okay, you can do that. But I don't want to install it globally on my machine. You can do that even with pip with a virtual environment. But Poetry covers everything. It covers virtual environments, it covers package management. So I really enjoy this package, and yeah, that's what I'm going to use. You can install it globally in your machine and then install anything you want. So I'm going to do Poetry init to initialize a Poetry file. Okay. Yes, we need Flask. Yeah. We do not need any development dependencies for the time being. Yep, that's it. Now we need to activate the environment, the virtual environment. So I'm going to do Poetry shell. That's how you activate your environment. Now I'm going to install my dependencies. Excellent. So now we'll come here, we've got our poetry.log and pyproject.toml file. We've got our dependencies here, great. And now I'm just going to create our file where we're going to create our API. I'm going to name it app. Okay. And first of all, we need to import the Flask class from Flask. So I'm going to say from Flask, import Flask. And here we're going to create an instance of the application. I'm going to say Flask. It needs then a name, so I'm going to use the file name. And I need a bunch of users because we're not connected to a database for this video, so I'm just going to keep it simple. Created a list of users previously here. Okay. There you go. And now we're ready to start building our API. So the first thing we need to do is create a function that's going to handle the incoming request for fetching all our users. So let's just call this get users. We don't need to take any arguments. Okay. And all we need to do is just return our users. So we're going to say return results users. So I like to nest my my resources that have many results within a results keyword of an object. Now, for Flask to be able to handle this, we need to register this route, and we do this by using this application we created here, and this can be used as a decorator. So I'm going to say app.route. And here it takes, the first argument is the endpoint that we need to handle this at. So I'm going to say API users. Okay, that's all we need. And here I'm going to run the development server that Flask gives us, and I'm going to safeguard it by saying if the name is equal to main, then run it. And I'll explain exactly what this does. We need to do app.run. Okay, and here we need to specify a couple of keyword arguments. So the first one is host, okay, and this one is 0.0.0.0, and then our port, I'm going to use 8000 on my machine. If there's a clash on your machine, you can change this to something else. And then debug will be true. The debug to true is because we want this development server to update or restart whenever it picks up a change that we've made in this file. Now this check here essentially tells, what this does is if you run this file directly, okay, this will be main, okay, and this will run. However, if you import this file in another file, this will not run. So this is a good practice to do. So let's just start our development server, and we do that by saying python 3 app.py. There you go, up and running. Now let's go on to Postman, okay? I use Postman to consume my APIs, and here we are in Postman, and I'm going to go here. I already have it here. It's localhost 8000 API users. So if I hit this endpoint, there we go, results, and we get 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 users, exactly what we have. So this is what we need. Now let's go back to our IDE and continue building this API. So we're gonna go and fetch our user. So we're gonna say define, and I'm gonna call this get user. Okay, here we need a user ID because we always, when we fetch single items of a resource, we tend to get them with their primary key. Okay, and I'm gonna decorate this with app.route. Okay, and this will be API /users /integer. Okay, this is called a converter in Python in Flask, and I'll explain exactly what it does. Okay, so what this statement here says, if you hit the endpoint called API users, and then this thing is 1. Okay, essentially what we're saying is there's going to be an argument here. We've named it user ID. You could have named it anything, but whatever you named it here, it needs to be named here as well. So I'm saying pick something up from here, name it user ID, and I'm expecting it here. And this thing here that says integer is a converter. So whatever we're getting there, we're going to convert it to an integer. If we actually pass a string, it's not gonna work. It's gonna throw a 404. But if it's an actual integer, it will convert it to an integer, because whatever comes in our URL, it is by default a string, so it will have to convert it. So how do we do this? How do we fetch the user? So let's just go here. We've got to filter the list that we have. Okay, so I'm gonna pass a lambda here. I'm gonna say user.get. We want to check by their ID, okay? So if their ID is equal to the user ID, the second argument here is going to be the users, because that's the users list, okay? So what we're saying here is use this function here for each iteration or for each item within the user. So it will grab every one of these objects, grab their ID, and if the ID matches this, okay, it will add it to our filter. From the filter, we want to only grab one thing. We don't want to create a list. So I'm just going to call next here. And here, next takes 2 arguments. So the first argument is, what do we call it? Is an iterator. And the second argument is the default value. So if it doesn't find anything, we want it to set this variable here to none. And we want to do that because we don't want to throw an exception, because this is not a good experience if we don't find a user. We want to handle that. So we're going to say if user is none, we want to return a status code of 404, so not found in the HTTP protocol. So there's a helper function here from Flask called abort, and it basically creates a response with the status code that we set. So I'm going to say 404. However, if you found the user, we want to return it. No, here we don't want it. We just want to return. So here, if he hasn't found the user, throw a 404. If you found the user, return the user. So let's just see if this works. So we're going to go back to Postman. And let's just fetch user number 2. There you go. It works fine. Excellent. So let's go back to our ID. And we need to now create a user. So we're going to implement the route for creating a user. So I'm going to say define create user. We don't need to take any arguments here. I'm going to pass for the time being. Decorate this with, again, app.route. So essentially we're registering this endpoint to be handled by this method. So I'm going to say API users, and then, well, that's it. There's a slight issue here because this one will clash with this one. And how do we fix this? It's quite easy. So here, there's another keyword argument called methods. And this methods is the HTTP verb. So in this case, whenever we're getting users, or we're getting a resource, we always have to respond to a get method, a get verb. Here, conversely, it has to be a post, only a post. Okay, so we're going to say post. So this will essentially look at the request and see if it's a get request or a post request. If it's a get request, it will send it here. If it's a post request, it will send it here. So that's how we solve that issue. Now we're going to get some data in the body of the request. So we're going to say request, and request is an object from Flask. So let's import that. Okay, so request, and then it has an attribute called JSON, and that's our JSON data. Now, if we were creating, or if we were connecting to a real database, when we're creating new resource, normally our database auto increments the primary key. So we're going to simulate that. So we're going to say last user ID is equal to users. So we're getting our user list from here. We're going to get the last one, right? Because the last one is the highest ID. I mean, this could have been in the wrong order, but in this case, it's in the right order. So we're just hacking it for this one. This is not really important for this video, but yeah, I'm just going to get the last one, and I'm going to get the ID. Then we need to create a new user. So I say new user is equal to a dictionary. We're going to set the ID because we never want to get the ID from the front end. Never. You always set the IDs on the back end, mainly from your database, but in this case, we're going to set it from what we got here. So we're going to say last user ID plus 1. So we're simulating an increment. So we've added that, and we're also going to add all the other data that came from the request. So we're unpacking it. So this one is complaining because it says Python 2.7 does not support start expressions in dictionaries. We're using Python 3, so it is supported. So we've got the new user, and we're going to add it to our list. So we're going to say users.append, and then we're going to say new user. Great. And then we're just going to return a dictionary, and we're going to say message. We're going to say user created. I always like to add a message whenever creating a user, and also passing the user as well in a user key. And then I'm going to say new user. Okay, we're done with this. Let's go back to Postman. We're here, and let's just create another user. So I've already prepared this. We've got John Jones. I've created it previously, but let's just go here. Let's see if there's a John Jones. There's no John Jones. So let's just create them. So I'm going to click send. It's sended. So let's go here. Let's refetch them, and then they are. So we've created our user successfully. Let's go back to our IDE. Okay, now we've created our user. Let's update one of our users. So let's just create another method. I'm going to say update user. We need the user ID. That's going to be passed by our decorator. So let's just say app.route. Here we need API users, and here we need the user ID. Great. Now, what do we do here? We need to get the data that was passed from the front end, from the request. So I'm going to say request.json. And then what we're going to do here is we're going to try and find the user. So I'm going to set user to none, and I'm going to show you why I'm doing this. And then I'm going to enumerate my list of users. So I'm going to say in enumerate users. So if you're not familiar with enumerate in Python, so what it does is it gives us, I believe it's a tuple. Let's see. Yeah, I think it's a tuple. So it gives us two things. So it gives us the index and the item in the list, okay? And the reason we need this is we need the index to be able to update our list of users, or the specific user. So we're going to say if the user.get the ID is equal to the user ID that was passed from the front end, then we found the user, okay? So we're going to say users of I, which is the index, is equal to a new dictionary, okay? We're going to get the existing user, unpack them, and also unpack whatever was passed from the front end. And the reason we do this is because this might be a partial update. So we're going to get everything from the existing user, and whatever else needs to be overridden will be overridden. That's why we add this second. So, and then because we found the user, we're just going to say user is equal to users of I, okay? And here we're just basically going to handle it. We're going to say if user is none, okay? So essentially we have not found the user. If that's the case, essentially, if we have not got to here, then we need to again abort and throw a 404 status code, okay? However, if we've gone past here and we haven't thrown a 404, we need to return that updated user. And I'm also going to send a message that says user updated, but we need to also pass the user as well. Excellent. So let's just try this again. So off to Postman. Okay, I forgot to do something. So let's just go back. So what have we done here? What have we forgot? So this, okay, this endpoint, if you look at it, it says API users / integer user ID. It's essentially the same as this. So we're going to have the same problem as before. So we're going to clash. So we need to tell this to respond to get requests. So we're going to say methods get. Okay, so this will only respond to a get method. And this one needs to respond to a couple. I'll explain why. So this needs to respond to put and also patch. So put in the REST protocol is a full update and patch is a partial update. So what we mean by that is when you're updating your user, you're sending all the data, of course, excluding the primary key. You're sending everything, you want to update everything. With a patch, you're sending some of the data. Personally, I tend to use put for everything because most of the times from the front end, you'll send everything because the backend has already sent you everything, right? When you're loading a page, you have a bunch of users or a specific user, and then you're going to send back whatever was returned together with your change. So I tend to use put, but you can use any. So let's go back to Postman. Okay. And here I'm going to send a put request. Okay, so I'm going to send for, let's say, user of ID 4. Okay, I'm going to put a random name and an age of 20. But before we do this, let's go and fetch this user. There you go. So their name is Jack Edwards and their age is 40. I'm going to change that. I'm going to change it to random name, age 20. And this is a put request, if you can see here. So I could do a put, I could do a patch, it would work the same way. Okay, so it seems to have updated it. Let's go here as well and refetch it, and it has updated it. So this has worked fine. Let's go back to our IDE, and now we need to implement our last HTTP method or verb, which is delete, okay? So we're going to say delete the user, and I need their ID, of course. I want to decorate my function with app route so we can register it. So we're going to say API users. We need an integer here, user ID, and again here we need methods, and here we need the delete method. Okay, so in order to delete our users, we've got to again enumerate, and we're going to say if user.get the ID is equal to user ID, then I need to say users.pop. We need the index. The index is I. Here I'm just going to say user is equal to none, and this is because I want to make sure that I know if I found a user or not. Okay, so if we got to here and we're setting the user to the actual user that we got from the list, it means that we found them. The reason I do this is I'm saying if user is none, so if they're none and means we haven't found them, I'm gonna abort again because I cannot tell the front end that I've updated or deleted a user when I actually haven't found them. So then here I found them because we've gone past here. I'm just gonna say we need a message. We're not gonna send the user, of course, because we've deleted them. We're gonna say user deleted. Okay. All right. Let's go to Postman and just try and delete one of our users. So let's go here. Let's fetch our users first. I'm gonna delete John Doe number 1, ID 1. So let's just delete user with ID 1. The method is delete. Let's send it. User deleted. So if we refetch this, there's no user here with ID 1. If we try and fetch them with 1, we're getting 404, which is correct. Okay. So going back to our IDE, let's just have a recap. What we do, we create an instance of Flask to return all our users. We return them in a key of results. We just decorate our function with the endpoint and the methods we need to respond to. When finding a specific user, we need to pass the parameter and also use a converter. Again, for creating the user, we just need a body which we're going to send in the request. So grabbing the JSON data and we're creating the user and returning them back. When updating a user, again, we're sending the new user back, finding the user, updating, and then send them back. And we only respond to put and patch methods. And when deleting, responding to delete methods. And yeah, just deleting the user if we find them. So yeah, that has been the video. I hope you enjoyed it. I really enjoyed making it. I hope you learned a lot from this. If you liked it, please like the video. Add any comments you want in the comment section of any questions you might have or any suggestions you might have of future videos you want to see. And yeah, I'll make some new videos that will essentially add to this. It will be an addition. We're going to do some authorization, authentication, validation. We're going to use databases. We're going to use an ORM. We're going to use migrations. There's a bunch of stuff coming on this channel. So please subscribe. And yeah, I'll be back with more content. Thank you for watching. And yeah, see you soon.